Thanks so much for joining this session. If anyone wants to switch the camera off on, that would be amazing. This is a bit more of an intimate session, and I hope just a chance for you to like get an idea of what the process of setting up a charity actually looks like and the key things you need to think about. And just to ask any questions you might have. I don't know if anyone here has actually like had a go at setting up a charity, or maybe like played around with the form or the documents that you might need, or is it kind of more of a just, I've never thought, I'm just thinking about it for the first time now and I don't even know where to start. If anyone has any thoughts on where you're at with that process.
I have been through building one charity process, so I've been through the process. Yeah.
Okay, good.
It's a long time.
Lived experience of, and how did you find it?
Well, it takes some time. Yeah, you need to go through the charitable objectives, this 13 charitable objectives. That was really the most difficult part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the purpose, charitable purpose.
Yeah.
So the charity commission, they returned it back and we have to do it again.
Oh, okay. So you had that quite often
Yeah.
happens.
Was,
that they'll pick up on things and they'll send it back to you. And sometimes they're actually quite brutal and they'll just cancel the application and then you have to start the whole thing again. So you're lucky if they came back and asked questions as opposed to just said start again. So it is quite a complex process.
Lucas and Samara, can you put me in the other group because I have
already
registered my organization as a community interest company, so maybe it's better to put me there if that's possible. Otherwise,
it's absolutely fine. Yasser, I'll move you over now.
Sorry,
that's fine. You're going now.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to share my screen. Hang on a minute. Can you see the worksheet now?
Yeah.
You can, great. So this is the worksheet that we have pulled together really just to help people with the process, because obviously when you walk away from this session, you might probably forget everything I've said. So everything you need to set up a charity is all the steps in order really are on this worksheet. And so I'm going to go through just some of the key aspects of it. So you kind of come to the idea that you want to set up a charity. And I think I mentioned the first thing you need to understand is what your charitable purpose is. And that's kind of like the underpinning of your organization. And what I've done here is link to two and the Charity Commission, as I mentioned, is the regulator for charities in the UK, and they actually provide lots of guidance on how you set up your charity and like key things to think about. But often it's about like knowing where to find that information. So hopefully what I've done here is like link to the key bits of guidance that can help you to navigate setting up the organization. So I'll just click on the first one here, which is helping you to understand what is a charity. And I said the first thing that you would need to do is be able to understand what your charitable purpose is. And so this guidance note essentially talks about the descriptions of those 13 charitable purposes, and it lists them all out here. So you have the full list. And if you want to be a charity, you basically need to find one of these headings that you can fit your activities under. So I don't know if on looking at these 13 headings, if there's any of them that are jumping out to you to be like, that kind of sounds like what I want my organization to do, or what it's going to do, or what it is doing. So a quite classic one is like the advancement of education. Like lots of people do activities which advance education. So you might be like, say, supporting people with learning. The Kay gave the example of like selling books in a bookshop, school, like setting up a school or a nursery might be something that's the advancement of education. I don't know if anyone wants to like say what they think if you're not sure, like what you think your charitable and purpose might be in this group.
I had a look when I was thinking of doing my own organization, and quite a lot of them applied, so I was really confused. Should I tick all of them, or should you be?
Yeah, that's a good question. You can actually have more than one charitable purpose. Totally fine. You probably don't want to have all of them as your charitable purpose, but you might find like 3 of them are ones that you could easily fall under, and that's totally fine. What I would say is that the more you pick from this list, the more you have to explain in the charity application. So if you're kind of feeling like, I think one might apply, but I'm not really sure if it does, or I don't know how I'd actually go about explaining. Like, for example, if you were going to say advancement of education is your charitable purpose, the application is then going to ask you to explain how you're delivering that education, who is delivering the education, what safeguarding do you have in place. Like the what you put here, what you pick will then trigger a range of questions from the Charity Commission. So it only really works if you've actually got a well thought out kind of purpose to develop later in the application, if that makes sense.
So if you, for example, then choose to point, and later on you might venture out into some of the others, is there the chance to then change or add? I think
yes,
yeah.
Yeah, there is. So once it's not super straightforward. So in a way, you're doing a bit of a balancing act when you set up your organization of covering everything you think you might do in the organization, but also being realistic in if it's not developed enough to provide examples of the work you're going to do, then the Charity Commission won't register you under that purpose. So, but if you start off with advancement of education, and then at a later point in like a year's time, you're like, actually, what I'm really doing is, as well as advancing education, I'm also preventing poverty. You could go back to the Charity Commission and you could say, now this organization has developed, there's actually an additional charitable purpose that I fall under, and I want to include that in my objects. And you can go back and make that addition at a later point. So for example, like I work at Oxfam for like other part of my job, and so they started off with the prevention and relief of poverty, and since then they've then added the advancement of human rights as their work has developed, and they then also added like a one around sustainable development as well. So they've got 3 charitable purposes, and which have, like I said, just over the 80 years have kind of come to fruition. Does that help? Great. Okay, so that's your first thing to do, is to, and I would also say you need to kind of, when once you've identified your charitable purpose, that description of that work. So you might be like the advancement of education in South London for the benefit of migrant families or something like that. You might be specific about exactly whose education you're advancing. And again, like I said, sometimes it can be too narrow and that can limit you because you can't actually do anything outside of the charitable purpose you've set. But sometimes it's helpful to focus your purpose into who exactly you're trying to support and who's going to benefit from the organization. So that was the first bit.
Sorry, can I ask?
Yeah, sure.
So my charity idea was, to register both here in UK and in Ethiopia as well. So the task, the charitable purpose I have is the advancement of education. I can say pre-primary education in Ethiopia, where I was originally from.
Yes. Yeah.
So can I consider Ethiopian people as a community, or it has to be only UK public?
No, you can say it doesn't have to be in the UK at all. So lots of charities will work with only outside of the UK, for example. So like I'm trying to think of one I did was with oh my God, what's it called? Idris Elba. He's from Sierra Leone, and his charity was to support people in Sierra Leone. So, and again, it's totally fine for that to be the case, and you can say in your charitable purpose that's who you're going to support. And then in the application, you would then say, it asks you where you're operating and where the people that you're supporting, where are they based? And you would say they're based in Ethiopia in that application. Does the commission add new purposes? No, It does. Sorry, that's actually a lie. Megan asked whether or not the commission adds new purposes. It doesn't really change them, but occasionally you'll have case law, which would mean, so someone might bring a case to the courts in the UK to be like, I believe that this activity is actually charitable. And one of those examples was the advancement of human rights. So that wasn't always a charitable purpose. And then there was cases over time that came to the courts and advocated for the fact that it is, that the advancement of human rights is a charitable purpose. Crazy that it wasn't a charitable purpose before, but it wasn't. And so things like, if you think of Amnesty International and Liberty, they're that kind of the authentic original human rights organizations, but they weren't set up as charities because essentially it wasn't a charitable purpose at that time. But it has, so yeah, it does change sometimes, and things might get added. And the advancement of animal welfare as well wasn't a charitable purpose originally, but got added. And same for sport, actually, amateur sport. So yeah, good question. Okay, so that's charitable, your charitable purpose. Another just quick point was around public benefit. So as I mentioned, it's not just your charitable purpose, but also you need to show sufficient public benefit is provided in the work that you're doing. And again, that's just showing who is going to benefit from your organization's work, that you're not going to cause any harm in what you're doing. And it's actually, you might feel like, of course, I'm not going to cause any harm in what I'm doing, but an example of where like the Charity Commission would see something not having public benefit is, for example, there's animal testing organizations, like animal rights organizations, who are against testing on animals. And people might say that that's that's a benefit for animal welfare, but actually the Charity Commission doesn't see it that way, because they see animal testing as having a broader public benefit. And so they wouldn't say that being an organization which is against animal testing is a charitable organization, because that they would say that's not for the public benefit. So it's just, that's a very niche example, but basically it's as I say, like, not everything that's good is charitable, unfortunately, and not everything that you think might be the public benefit is the public benefit. So just definitely worth looking at this. And the other thing is, you know, is there, the key thing they're looking for is where, if there's any personal benefit that you're going to gain in setting up your organization. So if I set up a charity and I only have one contract and it's with my company, and I'm going to, you know, benefit massively from that that contract, or by setting up my organization, they will also say that there isn't enough public benefit in what you're doing. The personal benefit is too great. So that's a key thing to be aware of when you're setting up. Okay, so that's that. I think the next thing I'm just going to look at is the governing document. So yeah, our next thing is to identify your trustees. So you have to register with 3 trustees of the organization. They pretty much won't let you register with less than 3. So having those people in mind, getting them to agree to be trustees is really important. And then you need to understand the constitution. So the constitution of your organization is the governing document, and every charity needs to have one of these when you set up the organization. And luckily, if you're a CIO, and this is the Charitable Incorporated Organization, the Charity Commission has examples that you can use, and you can just use this model document as your template, essentially, and then you can make changes to make it bespoke to your organization. So I don't know, has anyone like looked at a governing document before? You have, Zainab? Okay. How did you find it? Did it look like something simple to complete, or were you kind of a bit lost?
Completely lost, because I think it's also one of the questions I had. What's in choosing whether you are going to be a foundation or the one?
Or the association model. Yeah, so there's 2 types of documents and structures you can use for your organization. So the foundation model is where, so remember we talked earlier about there being directors of an organization and also members. So I think, and like the members being like the shareholders in an organization, and the members are, it's like they're called company law members, and they're the owners, the ultimate owners of the organization, and they're a separate role to the directors legally. Is a bit confusing to understand, and you don't really need to like understand the difference too much for this purpose. But when choosing, you either are going to choose a foundation model where the trustees are the same people as the company law members, which is what most people will go for, and they'll say yes, those two roles need to be occupied by the same group of people. So if you're a trustee, you're also a company law member. And I would say probably for most people's purposes, you would pick that foundation model. The association model is where you have a distinction between the trustees and the company law members. And an example I'm trying to think of as a good one is, have you heard of the National Trust? So the National Trust is a charity, and it's an association model because there are lots of people that are members of the National Trust, and we can all go to their meetings and we can all vote and be like, yes, I really want the National Trust to like be more interested in this colonial property. Or you can have, and the trustees are a different group of people. So lots of associate models are basically, they're trying to get a broader group of people to be involved in the membership of the organization. I'm trying to think of other examples. Sports clubs quite often have this model as well, where the members of the club are like all those people that play sport in the organization who want to turn up to meetings and like have a say in how the organization's run. And some organizations like it as well because they can bring in a broader group of stakeholders into the overall running of the organization, but it can be a more complicated model to like administer. So I would say if you're looking for just like a really straightforward organization, the foundation model is more straightforward. And you can change if at a later point you think I'd rather have more members, company law members, you can do that, but I would probably just stick with the foundation model to start with. So essentially you go into this, just pick the PDF model. You go into this governing document. How much longer have I got, by the way? 8 minutes. Gosh, it's going so quickly. Go into the document, and it's pretty much, it gives you an explanation of what the document means. But what this document is basically doing is saying, this is my organization. This is the purpose for which I'm just like, this is all the guidance notes, which is so helpful. So this is the name of the organization. This is my charitable purpose that you'd write here. So the objectives of the CIA are to advance the education of primary school children in Ethiopia. You'd write that there. And then the powers, they just say like what the organization, the trustees can do. So they can like employ staff, for example. And this bit here sets out like the limits of the income. So it's basically saying you know, we talked earlier about trustees can't be paid. That's what this part of the document is saying. So it's saying you can pay trustees expenses, but they can't be, or you can pay them to provide a service in the organization, but you can't pay them to be a trustee. So that's basically limiting how money is spent in the organization. This is just about conflicts. This is about winding up the organization. So sometimes there's an optionality, but there are guidance notes as you go through to just explain which option you should choose, but there aren't very many. And then this bit here talks about trustees. And so this is another optionality point saying what the number of trustees that you need in the organization, at least 3. You might have more, you might have 5 trustees if you've got that many friends. And then the other option, and then it talks about kind of how the trustees are appointed. So that's another big thing about charities is the trustees will come in on some kind of on like a rotation cycle. So they might join for the organization for 3 years, and then they have the opportunity to step down, or you might want to appoint new trustees. And you're basically here, you're saying, these are the 3 trustees I'm starting off with. This is how long they're going to be in office for. So 4 years, 3 years, 2 years. And you might want to keep it. You don't want everyone doing the same amount of time because otherwise they all kind of retire at the same point and you've got no trustees. So I'm just going through this like really quickly, but yeah. So
Mara,
yeah.
There's a quick question in the chat, which is quite interesting, just about, is it true that trustees can vote you out as a CEO?
Yeah, they could.
Yes.
They have like ultimate control over the organization. So you could be the founder, and the trustees could just decide that they don't want you anymore. And that is a risk that you take on, because in being a trustee, that you almost potentially lose control of the organization. It doesn't happen very often. Like, it's very, I've not personally ever come across that, but it's just something to be aware of. And that's why you want your trustees to be your allies in the organization. So that's the governing document that you need to submit with your application. And then the key bits, once you've kind of completed that governing document, you need to be able to complete the charity application form. This is a really long set of questions. Like, when you print it out, it actually ends up being like 80 pages of questions, which not all of them are relevant to the questions will come up depending on what your charitable objects are. But you basically need to look. This is just the, I wonder why it's in Welsh as well. But you basically need to log in and start an application process. And what that application process is essentially doing is asking you about what you're doing, who you're doing it for, and what the benefit to the public is. And you need to give quite a lot of detail describing the activities, who they're for, why do people need this? If you're providing a service, why do they need this service? Like, for example, you mentioned in having young people, supporting young people in Ethiopia, in primary school, they'll want to know why that's needed in Ethiopia. Like, is there some kind of disadvantage that you are addressing with your charitable purpose, with your charitable entity? They also need to tell them like where you're getting your funding from. So you don't need to say how much necessarily, but they'll want to know where the income is being generated from. Is it grants? Are you providing a service? Are you trading? The other thing they'll want to know about is like property, like where are you going to be based? If you don't have a physical location, which most people don't when they start off, that's fine, but you have to explain why you're like operating from your bedroom. And what else do you need to know? Yeah, again, just like mainly describing what the benefit is. And then there might be specific policies they ask you for. Like, if you're doing something education based, they might be like, what's your safeguarding policy as well? So there's quite a lot to explain in the application, and it's quite a tough one. And as you mentioned, like, might be that they send it back to you and say you've not properly answered these questions. So the more information you can give, the better. And I've linked in the note to some guidance. So I would recommend like reading the guidance, because that helps you to understand what they're looking for in the answers. And then some other just kind of practical steps is that you need to like check the name of your organization, make sure no one else has got the same name, otherwise you won't be able to register either. But yeah, I'm going to stop there because I've got like 2 minutes left. I've just like gone through it really quickly, but hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour of how you would go about registering a charity. And if you have any questions, now's the time.
Thanks, Samara. I think the most amazing thing is what I said at the beginning as well, is that worksheet is gold dust for me as well as for, I'm sure, everyone else, because there's so much, like, it's so hard to work it out from the beginning, and so having those steps is super, super helpful. And it's exactly the same, guys, as well on there for the CIC. So thank you so much. That was really helpful.
And I was also just say is, if you're kind of struggling a bit with how to describe your charitable purpose, finding other organizations, and I'll just share I don't know if I've got a minute, is looking at what other people have done. So you can literally go on the Charity Commission website. Hang on. Is my screen still shared, or is it gone?
No, we can't see anything right now.
Okay. Can you see anything now?
Still not.
Okay.
Yes, now we can.
Okay. Let's see if I can do this. So if you go Charity Commission and then you went like search, you can search the register of charities, and so I'm just going to put an Oxfam just for ease. You can go on here and you can be like, okay, Oxfam, you can see how much they earn, their income. You can go on their website, go on their page, go on governing document, and then you can see what their charitable objects are. And every charity in the UK will be registered on here. So if you want to do migrant rights work, you can go and look at migrants organisers objects. You can literally look at anyone's objects and just kind of copy them. I always just copy other people's and just tweak it to make sure it reflects what you're actually doing. And here you can kind of see like what the organization does, how it helps people, where it operates. So these are the kinds of things that would come up on your own page once you've registered. So that's just like a little cheat tip for you.
Just a quick question. We've got only 15 seconds left, but what's the time frame for registering for a charity?
Oh,
We know
it takes,
CICs is super quick, but what about charity?
yeah,
What would you
it
say?
takes like anything from 2 to 6 months. Depend, you know, if it's a very straightforward charity, it can be quick, and they'll come back to you quickly. If they've got questions, it might take 6 months, but they do come back to you eventually. So you just have to be patient with it. Great.
What if I register a charity and if I couldn't get any donation, any funding for a year or two, what's going to happen?
Nothing really. If you keep making your filings, they might ask a few questions after a while, and eventually you might feel like I just need to close the organization, but nothing bad is going to happen if you don't bring in any income. But you're meant to be sustaining some kind of income, and that's what the questions in the form are asking you. But it is quite possible you might not make any money, and it just happens sometimes. So that's okay. Great. Thank you, guys.
Amazing. Great timing. Thank you.